Hi, welcome to Piano with Georgia. I'm Georgia, and in today's video, we are going to be talking about fingerings. Why would you want to use them and how to plan for them? So hop on your bench and let's get started. Fingerings is a topic that I get a lot of resistance regularly from my students about, from standardized fingerings for scales to using a fingering in their piece of music that I think would be better for them than what they're currently doing. But there's always a reason behind the fingerings that you choose and that you should use. The first thing you want to consider when you are selecting a fingering for any passage in any piece of music, whether it be very easy or whether it be very hard, is you want to pick finger numbers that help you from where you're coming, slide effortlessly into where you are, and then just as seamlessly flow into where you're going. You want to avoid as many jumps as possible, or things that can just leave hiccups in your sounds. Also, there might be really quick little passages. Well, you probably want to plan for stronger fingers on those particular spots. And all of these attributes of our hands, different finger strengths, different flexibilities, different sizes, different shapes, all of those things factor into the finger numbers you choose. Another thing to consider about fingerings is there's no absolute best fingering out there for anything. Every choice you make about which fingers you put on which notes absolutely reflects the size, shape, and skill of your hands. Sometimes a fingering that works wonderfully for me, I have a student who has hands that their fingers are about 2 inches longer than mine, and that fingering is not ideal for them, and vice versa. Frequently, you will see in your pieces of music some suggested fingerings from editors or composers, and I will regularly have students who feel like if they don't do the specified fingering that's on their music, they're breaking some sort of rule. This is not the case. This is the editor or composer telling you the fingerings that they like, that work the best for their hands. You could start there, but if it doesn't feel good, if it doesn't feel like it's ever going to be able to go fast enough, then that's probably not the best fingering for you. So we're going to look at some samples of music and how you might look into what fingering possibilities there are, as well as how you might choose. One of the hardest things to do is when you have a brand new piece of music, you can't feel how it's going to feel at a fast speed to select fingerings that will definitely work at a very fast pace, even though they might work great at a slow pace. So I have some tips also for how you can use very small fragments and play it almost full tempo very, very soon so you can test out the different fingerings at that fast pace. One of the first things that I do when I'm starting a new piece of music is to pick my finger numbers. The reason why I think it's of utmost importance from the very, very beginning when you're setting eyes on this piece of music is muscle memory. Muscle memory is a very, very powerful force in our playing of music. Muscle memory can help us to play faster than our brains can really even think in a given moment. So we have to train it to be clear and consistent. Otherwise, your performances are never going to be consistent. Every time you use different finger numbers for the same notes, as far as your muscles in your hands go, you're playing a completely different piece of music. So what you do matters less than doing the same thing every time. So write down the fingerings you like. I'm just as guilty of this as the next person. I'll be playing along and I figure out this fingering that feels great and I don't want to stop in this given moment and grab a pencil and write it down. And then I can't remember it later. The next practice session, I'm starting all over again, trying to figure out the fingering. So Save yourself a lot of time and energy and write down what you do. Now let's look at a specific example. This first piece that I've pulled up is called Nuvole Bianche. For all of those of you who speak Italian, pardon my pronunciation, I'm terrible at accents. White Cloud is the English translation, and it's by a composer named Einaudi. This particular piece I have selected for you to look at because of the left-hand patterns. Left-hand patterns in your music are something that frequently occur as a background harmonic foundation in which right hand then dances over the top of. Left hand will need to be regularly very quiet, very stable. So even in these background moments in music, the fingering choices you make matter because you don't want accents here and there, or to choose a finger on a note in a jump that makes it hard not to accent when there's a choice that makes it easier not to accent. Well, in this first example, we have some left-hand arpeggios. Now, the first part of this arpeggio, I can reach without moving. By the way, that's the first thing you want to notice, is the first two notes are F and C. Well, maybe you have a smaller hand and you might think, I'll do 5 and 1 there. But then you notice the third note of the measure is another F. Already I'm having to move. I don't want that, so I'm going to spread out and I'm going to do 5, 2, 1. Now, for those of you that an octave may be a difficult interval to reach, that is okay because we're going to be playing these notes one at a time. So even if you can't quite reach that, you're going to be able to rotate right over to it and reach it. Now, if your hands are very large, then this should be pretty comfortable. Now, looking ahead, the next note I have is an A flat. So I need to get to this key right here. So first choice is I could cross over, maybe with a 2, and I notice I'm going right back down. So this feels pretty comfortable. Now 2 is a shorter finger on the hand, so you might experiment with crossing finger 3 instead. That would look like this, and then I come back down. If your hand is on the larger side, you might want to try a more spread out fingering where you don't have to cross over at all. Something that might look like this. No crossover at all. Again, personal preference will rule the day, so see which one feels better. Now in the next measure, I have exactly the same pattern, so my instinct right away is to think, oh, well, let's try the same fingering. Whatever you liked in the first measure of our example, let's do it again. So I set up with my octave interval. I'm going to be having my note F. For the first one, I personally preferred the 5, 2, 1, 2. So I'm going to try that first go. 5, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 5. That felt okay, but I didn't really, it felt a little awkward to me to get over my thumb. So I'm going to try the other one where we don't have to cross over at all. 5, 3, 2, 1. Now, despite my hand size being on the smaller end of the scale, this is the fingering I prefer here. So depending on what black keys and white keys in combination with each other you have, that's going to affect the fingering you choose. So first I would do a crossover because I have all white keys going to a black key. Then I would do a spread out fingering because I have all black keys going to a white key. And again, not absolutes. This is just my personal preference. You may like all spread out. You may like the crossover with the black keys. It's totally up to you. One thing you can rely on is your thumb will like going under your hand. So frequently, if you're gonna try to get more fingers on one side of the hand or the other, using your thumb whatever note your thumb is on, using that note as kind of a pivot point is usually going to send you in the right direction. The next example we're going to look at has more right hand activity that we need to plan for. This is a piece of music that's very famous and commonly attributed to Johann Sebastian Bach, but musicologists have told us that he likely did not actually write this piece of music, and it should be attributed to the composer you're seeing on your screen, Christian Petzold. Again, forgive pronunciations. So as I look at this piece of music, this one actually has some finger numbers there. So I'm going to start with what I see. And I'm going to try out setting my hand up, finger 3 on the B flat, and right away they suggest 4 on A. Now I call this little adjustment a squish. Just like in the last example, we had a crossover. Sometimes you can make your hand more like an inchworm, and you can squish towards, again, usually the thumb, and you can make an adjustment that gives you more fingers available on one side or the other of your hand. So in this example, they're doing a squish right away, where they bring over finger 4, and then there's another example of a classic fingering tool, and that is to change fingers on the same note. Repeated notes are very stable. You're already there, it's hard to miss them. So they're a great opportunity to adjust your hand position and get set up for what's coming in the future. And that's exactly what you see here. I'm playing that D with my thumb, and then I'm going to trade it to finger 2 because now I can touch both of the next 2 notes that are coming up in my music. Now going back just this little phrase, I have an alternate idea for something I might do for a student who doesn't particularly like the squish. What you could do here is, instead of starting on finger 3, what if you started on finger 4? And then you could just stretch your thumb. Still do the same finger trade and match the composer's or editor's fingerings of choice there. So avoiding a particular tactic that you might not like is always a possibility. Another type of fingering adjustment you will find yourself regularly in need of doing, and that is a jump. When there's no other options available, sometimes you just have to completely shift and move your entire hand. Where that's coming into play in this example is right after I try out whatever fingerings I want in that first phrase, measure 3. I have my octave. I'm immediately going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even though they're not written there, because that's a scale. This is the reason we practice scales forever. They're all over the place in your music. So I'm simply going to use good old 5-finger scale, fingering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. However, when I do, I'm ending with a 5 on my D. My next note is this E flat. Now actually trying to do a shift and getting that over there could be done, but I don't want to. First of all, it's the end of a phrase, which is a nice place to have a little bit of a breath anyway. So I'm just going to let go of that 5, and I'm going to move my entire hand. And that's what this editor is also suggesting. And we have the entire measure covered. I can keep going, and I'm still good. Now, next, we have the editor, or composer, probably editor, suggesting we cross over finger 2. And I'm ignoring that little trill thing on purpose. So that finger 2 cross, I do like it. And I notice I have my thumb on a white key. My 2 is going to a black key. Transferring from white keys to black keys is another great place to maneuver around your hand, because you have the terrain difference in height that frequently will provide more space under your hand to maneuver around. Now, another fingering option you could use here would be perhaps to cross different finger numbers than finger 2. So test out a variety of options, although you don't want to waste too much time just working out options for fingerings if you like the one the editor already wrote in. So frequently, unless there's a problem, I won't really mess with different fingerings. Now, getting back to that little trill thing that I skipped, that little zigzaggy, those are called trills. And back in Baroque era, they did not have our modern day instrument, and they would frequently use cymbals just like this to have the sound keep going instead of just play and hold. Our modern day instrument, regularly you'll hear performances with those little trills left out, which is just because our modern day instrument holds the sound just fine without them. But you can sound a little bit more Baroque-ish if you do them. What I'm going to do is now I'm going to consider the fingers that I want on that little trill, because generally trills go on the fast side. So I'm going to make sure I have some strong fingers, and I'm going to make sure that I choose the one I like the best. So if I follow the editor's suggestions and I have finger 2 on the B flat in measure 6, I'm set up like this. And then I can use 2 and 1 for that little trill. My favorite personal trill fingers are the bunnies, the 3 2s. So I might experiment with, what if I cross finger 3 here, and then I can use my favorite trill fingers. Common trill fingers are 1 2, 3 2, also 1 3, because sometimes you can get a little rotation of the wrist to help with your speed. So that would be another option you could try there. And now let's look at our final example. When you see the music for this final example, please don't freak out. We're not doing a video on rhythm today, but I want to show you 4 different editions, professional, respected editions of the Beethoven Pathetique Sonata, where we have 4 very different fingerings. So let's take a peek. I told you this thing looks intimidating. So this run here, we have this edition suggesting I go cross a 4, cross a 3, cross a 3, cross a 4, 3, 3. Again, I was not paying attention to the rhythm. I'm just like playing them pretty steady all the way through. If I look at another edition, that same exact run now has some different fingerings. They have some 4s where there were 3s, some 3s where there were 4s. Let's look at it. So it starts the same way, 1 5. Then we have 4, cross 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 3. It's different. Now, this particular run goes into a chromatic scale. If you've practiced chromatic scales on your own, likely the fingering you used, or that is kind of the most standardly taught in all the different lesson materials, is using finger 3 on every single black key, 1 on most of the white keys, except when you have 2 in a row. Neither of these editions yet matches that standardized fingering. So let's take a peek at another one. Now in this edition, again, respected edition, we have 3 finger numbers written in there for the whole thing. In this edition, you don't get much help, so you would be having to try more options on your own. What I would default to if I were looking at this edition, the standard fingering that I'd been taught when I was young and literally practicing my entire life. So I would do something like, kind of keep my hand there. Now they do suggest a 4 here, then a 3, maybe we keep going with the standardized fingering, where I did all 3s as my crossovers, and again, kept my 3 on all the black keys, 1, 2 on my white keys. Let's look at another option. So we have another edition with Yet another fingering. Now this one has a lot written in for us, so we have no doubts about what the editor thought should be done. This is the first one that doesn't put a 5 on that opening E flat. I will throw out there are many editors who avoid putting thumbs on black keys like at all costs. They just never ever do it. It's like breaking some sort of cardinal rule. However, I personally have a longer thumb than average for someone with my hand size, so I like putting my thumbs on black keys. So even that has no absolutes. Let's look at this fingering. So he suggests 1, 4, and then we have 3, 3, a 2, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. This is the only edition you will see that had crossing of 2s. Every other edition had 4s and 3s in different particular orders, but here we have 2 places where you do 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. That may come about because this particular editor was trying to use what he felt were the strongest possible fingerings for him. So maybe he just liked that 2, 1, 2, 1. You might too. If I were working on the Pathetique sonata, what I would do is I would check out all these different fingering options from different editors, different editions, which many of them you can find on IMSLP, which is a music database for copyright expired pieces of music. They're usually scans and photos, so they're not like the best visual quality. So you might want to buy your own edition still, but it's a great place to go and just peek at some of the different fingerings so you don't actually have to own 4 or 5 editions of the Beethoven sonatas, which, unless you're a nerd like me, that might be more money you want to spend on one piece of music. Now again, in a fast run like this, sometimes you might choose a fingering that works great when you're in the first learning stages, but you discover later, as it gets faster, it doesn't work at all for your hand. Those moments can be so discouraging because your muscle memory becomes so strong so fast, and to unlearn a fingering and relearn it a different way, it's like it requires twice as many repetitions on the new fingering as it ever did on the old fingering. And still, sometimes if you get nervous, it might come back. Of course, these things are going to happen, so don't feel like if you have to change a fingering, that's like something horrendous, but it is time-consuming and annoying. So when that does happen to you, know that you're not alone. So when we're choosing these fingerings, we want to keep fast tempos in mind. When you're first learning notes, though, how in the world are you going to feel what this monstrosity is going to be like when it's fast? Well, you can't feel the whole thing, but you could probably feel a few little notes. The crossovers are going to be the spots where you're going to have the different options and that you're going to want to see if they're fast. So as I look at this huge thing, I would maybe just look at the first little crossover. So as we go, this first one suggests crossing a 4 there. So I'm going to test and see if that 4 crossover feels good by just going, let's see, I could go, but I missed it. This is new. So let's try fewer notes. The real action is happening right there. So what if I start with finger 3 on the D flat, and I'm just going to just try as fast as I can possibly go, seeing how it feels to get finger 4 on that B flat. Give it a few tries and see if you like it. Now, one of the other editions had a finger 3 on that B flat, so you could try the same exact thing, but now instead of crossing finger 4, I'm going to cross finger 3. Give it a few tries. Playing just 4 notes, I can go pretty fast right away because I can memorize it and just watch my hand. I would recommend each little crossover, just take a little fraction of notes. Now say I decide I like the finger 4 crossover. Well, okay, then I'm going to look at the next little grouping of notes. The next action is my thumb, and this edition is suggesting finger 3 on the F sharp, so I might just go to that one as fast as I can. Again, don't worry about what the rhythm actually is in the piece. Just go as fast as you can for this one little snippet because you're testing whether this fingering will work at a very fast tempo. When you get kind of ideas in your head for both of those, before you do too many repetitions, you might want to try 2 little segments of it. You might have to go a little bit slower, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be like full tempo. You're just kind of testing it out as fast as you can. I hope all of this advice on fingerings and planning for your fingerings has helped you think about different ways that you can assure that you learn your music as fast and efficiently as possible, because of course the end goal of all these fingerings is to play a beautiful piece of music that you love. So this will help you get there sooner. Please like and subscribe to support the channel, and I will see you next time.